The Houston Astros live to fight another day after a Game 4 victory keeps them from getting swept by the Rays in the ALCS. Meanwhile, the Dodgers have turned the tables on the Braves, but Atlanta's still leading in the National League Championship Series. Hello, everyone, and welcome into this Thursday, October 15th edition of Around the Bases from 110 Sports. As always, we're live streaming on the 110 Sports Network at 110sportsmedia.com/live, twitch.tv/110sports, and all the 110 Network shows are available on demand on Spotify and Apple Podcast in podcast form, as well as on YouTube and on the website 110sportsmedia.com. A lot to talk about here today on this show. It's a pretty simple formula. Let's just dive right into it. We're going to start by, of course, breaking down the latest from the ALCS. The Astros backs up against the wall, and they very much still are, even after that win last night. But obviously, they had to win that game to avoid getting swept, and they did. So we'll discuss that and what's happened in that series, and is it over? And, my predictions and whatnot for the rest of the way. We'll talk about that. Plus, we'll go through news and notes as we always do. Then we'll look at the NL side of things. The Braves jumping out to a 2-0 lead in that series, but then all of a sudden it wasn't Max Fried or Ian Anderson on the mound for Atlanta, and that proved to be a problem for the Braves as the Dodgers offense woke up in a huge way, a historic offensive outburst last night in NLCS Game 3. We'll end the broadcast as we always do with a look at what's on deck. So we'll look at the pitching matchups for today's games, and I'll give you my predictions for those. So, as for the AL side, veteran Zach Greinke delivered with a great outing yesterday, and Jose Altuve and George Springer went deep for Houston as the Astros defeated the Rays last night 4-3 to force a Game 5 of the ALCS after Tampa Bay, as I mentioned, took the first three contests in that series. So a bit of a recap for you. We talked about the first two games of this series back on Tuesday's broadcast. Back on Sunday, in Game 1, the Rays won 2-1. Randy Arozarena homered in that game. Mike Zunino with a go-ahead RBI single. Blake Snell was good. The bullpen for the Rays dominated. Framber Valdez for the Astros was very good. And Altuve's home run in the top of the first inning was the only run for the Astros. So Game 1 went to the Rays. We talked about that. We also talked about Game 2, which was, of course, another Rays victory. This one was 4-2. Manuel Margot, the outfielder for Tampa Bay, was the hero in that one with a 3-run home run in the first inning after an Altuve error, and then a great catch diving off the field of play down the right field line great catch from Manuel Margot in Game 2. Mike Zunino added a solo home run in the 7th, but really it was that Margot 3-run home run that was all the offense the Rays would need. Because Charlie Morton was very good for Tampa Bay in that one, and the Astros were able to get 2 runs on a Carlos Correa home run in the top of the 6th inning, and a George Springer double play in the 9th inning resulted in a run scoring, but that was all that Houston would score, so the Rays taking Game 2. And that's where we were on Tuesday's show. And then we go into Game 3, and that was Tuesday night, and we saw a defensive clinic put on by the Tampa Bay Rays with outstanding catches from Margot, from Kevin Kiermaier, from Hunter Renfroe, some great plays on the infield as well from Joey Wendell and Willie Adames and Brandon Lau and G-Man Choi, and it goes on and on and on. Some absolutely sensational defensive plays by the Rays in this Game 3. I mean, it's been great defense for the Rays in this entire series, but particularly in Game 3, it was like the Astros were hitting balls everywhere, and it just didn't matter because there was basically no spot on the field they could hit it that the Rays would not be able to record an out. On the flip side of that, the Astros defense in game three was very bad, and it really all goes back to one player. And we talked about it on Tuesday's show. In game two, it was a Jose Altuve throwing error that opened the door for Marco to come to the plate in the first inning and hit that 3-run home run. Well, his defensive struggles, really his throwing struggles, it's not like he's been unable to field ground balls. His problems, Altuve's problems throwing the ball, continued in game three as an error in the sixth inning by Altuve, what looked like a double play scenario, perfectly made double play ball. Altuve bounced it, the throw to second base, wasn't much chance for Correa, and that opened the door for a nightmare sequence of events for the Astros in game three, which included back-to-back hit batters and a 5-run sixth inning for the Rays. And that was it. Because the Rays only needed those 5 runs. Again, the pitching was good enough to get it done without a ton of offensive support. 5 runs is pretty good. But Altuve homered in the first inning for the Astros. It was, hope early. I mean, up until the sixth inning, it was a 1-0 Houston lead. So there was hope early for the Astros, of course. And then Brantley homered in the sixth inning. Michael Brantley, the veteran outfielder for the Astros. But it was really just that big sixth inning for Tampa Bay that made the difference in this game. And it all, I can't say for sure that there wouldn't have been runs scoring if not for the Altuve error. You can't, ever, when it comes to scoring errors and earned runs and whatnot, you're never allowed to assume a double play. So the throwing error on Altuve only resulted in that one. It's not, you can't assume 2 outs would have been recorded on the play is the way it breaks down, but it looked like an easy double play ball, and it's very easy to believe that had he been able to make a competent throw, frankly, that things could have turned out a lot differently for the Astros, but it didn't. And of course, Tampa Bay taking game three on Tuesday night by a score of 5-2. Ryan Yarbrough threw 5 innings, 2 runs allowed, 5 strikeouts, and the Tampa Bay bullpen held the Astros scoreless the rest of the way. Jose Urquidy was good for the Houston Astros. It was about everything you could expect from him. 5 innings, 1 earned run, and then a reliever came on for the Astros after the Altuve error, and that's when things started to really, of course, all unraveled in the 6th inning. The rest of the Astros bullpen was good, but it didn't matter at that point. Again, with the Rays, they're consistently showing they're not going to allow a ton of runs in a game. If you're the Astros, you're only going to get a couple, so you cannot afford to make sloppy mistakes because this is a Rays team that it's not an offensive juggernaut, but it's a Rays team that has enough guys. They're going to make you pay for your mistakes, and they did that in Game 2, and they did that in Game 3, and that's how the Rays got out to a 3-0 series lead, and that's how we got into last night. The Rays 1 win away from a sweep. The Astros, obviously a must-win, an absolute must-win situation, or they're going home for this season. And the Astros needed to win, of course, to survive another day. Jose Altuve, who, of course, like we talked about, those defensive struggles as he made 3 throwing errors in a period of 2 games. Well, he's doing well at the plate, though. For all his defensive struggles, it's the flip side. In the batter's box, he's doing incredible things. It was a poor offensive year for him, but it's been a great postseason offensively for Altuve. So he got the scoring started last night in Game 4 with a solo home run in the bottom of the first inning off of Rays starter Tyler Glasnow. In the bottom of the third, it was Jose Altuve again, this time with an RBI double that made it 2-0 Houston. And it looked like, okay, the Astros are going to get the win here. Maybe it won't be all that hard for them. Maybe the Rays offense will go completely quiet in Game 4. It was trending that direction early. But again, it was still very early in this game until it was just the 4th inning when the Rays got a 2-run home run to tie things up. And guess who it was from? Of course, it was Randy Arozarena striking again. A blast, a two-run shot off of Zach Greinke that made it 2-2, and all of a sudden, I'm thinking now. I go from thinking, okay, maybe the Rays' offense is going to be silenced tonight. The Astros will get a 3-0 win or something like that. To all of a sudden, Arozarena hits that home run, it ties it, and I'm thinking, okay, the Rays are going to get this sweep tonight. That's just sort of my line of thinking. It was reactionary, of course, pretty reactionary, but that's what I was thinking at that point. And then we get to the bottom of the fifth inning, and the Astros get back on top in this game as George Springer took Tyler Glasnow deep with a runner on, and Houston's back up by 2 runs. It's 4-2. Now, the Rays did make it interesting in the ninth inning as we fast forward to the ninth. Score still 4-2 until Willy Adames doubled in Joey Wendell, and then he advanced to third. So the Rays had the tying run at third base, the winning run at the plate, but Houston closer Ryan Presley got a line out to end it, and the Astros narrowly get that 4-3 victory last night in Game 4 to avoid being swept in the ALCS by the Rays. Glasnow for Tampa Bay gave up those 2 home runs, so 4 earned runs, not his greatest start, 8 hits allowed, but it wasn't as if he was disastrous. Meanwhile, the big hero for the Astros, of course, aside from George Springer and Jose Altuve, was Zach Greinke, who really stepped up. Greinke had struggled down the stretch in the regular season. The veteran, he's been around forever, but he got off to a great start this season, and then he really struggled down the stretch, and he struggled in his most recent postseason start. He had been battling with a sore arm that for a minute there it looked like maybe he wouldn't be able to continue pitching in the postseason, but then we find out there's no structural damage. He's going to push through it, and he stepped up last night for Houston, going 6 strong innings, allowing just those 2 runs from the Randy Arozarena homer, and he got out of a big bases loaded jam in the 6th inning by striking out Mike Brasso on a 3-2 changeup. Dusty Baker went out to the mound. It looked like he was going to pull Greinke from this game, but Baker stuck with his veteran starter, and it ended up paying off. Greinke, 1 ball away, the pitch was a ball, and then all of a sudden that's another run for the Rays, but he gets the strikeout instead. Greinke picking up his first postseason victory since 2015, which is a little bit hard to believe. It's been that long for him. Greinke struck out 7 and walked 1, and so that's where we are right now. The Rays taking the first 3 games of this series, the Astros taking Game 4 last night, but they're still going to have to win another 3 in a row, which is something that has only been done. A team has only come back from a 3-0 deficit once in MLB history in a 7-game postseason series, so the task is still enormous for Houston and Dusty Baker's club. They're going to have to win 3 in a row still. Meanwhile, the Rays, they just need to win 1 of the next 3 now. It was 1 of the next 4. Now it's 1 of the next 3. They're still in the driver's seat here very much in this series. And as far as some of my takeaways from how we got here and why this series is 3-1, first off, defense. Defense, a lot of this is going to be similar to what we talked about on Tuesday. Only 2 games had been played by then, but a lot of the themes are still the same. And in particular with those first 3 games of this series, which was really the difference, of course, is the Rays jumping out to a 3-0 lead. It was defense. Defense was crucial. And Tampa Bay, as I mentioned, their players were all over the place, making big plays. I mean, I have to think there's been like 2 or 3 leaping grabs by outfielders and like 3 or 4 or 5 sliding grabs by outfielders. There's been a number of athletic infield plays. Joey Wendell isn't letting anything past him in the hot corner, and they've got first baseman for Tampa Bay in Yandy Diaz and Ji-Man Choi, who are literally falling all over the place to make plays. Even pitchers getting involved for Tampa Bay in making big athletic plays. in making it, the Astros have made a lot of hard contact in this series. It's not as if their bats have been, completely silenced and they're striking out all over the place. The Astros have made some hard contact, but the Rays are just making every play. And that's been key for keeping the Astros off the board, of course. But on the flip side of it, it's been just as crucial for this series, probably even more crucial, is the Astros' defensive problems. And yes, it really does come to Jose Altuve, who, of course, is having an outstanding offensive season. Offensive postseason, I should say. It was a very bad offensive regular season. He's having a great offensive postseason, but you just can't deny that his throwing errors have cost the team multiple runs in this series, and in a big way, things could, it cost them games 2 and game 3. Now, it's not as simple as to say, well, if Altuve had made those throws, the Astros win game 2 and game 3, but look, I mean, these are the kind of things. Altuve, obviously, he's a very skilled defender. He's a good second baseman. He's been a good second baseman for years. This isn't, and he's not. It doesn't appear that he's hurt or anything. He just all of a sudden can't throw the ball. Couldn't throw the ball. Seems like he's maybe figured it out now. Couldn't throw the ball to first base. He's bouncing throws, and this is a Rays team where we know they will capitalize on your mistake. We knew that coming in, your mistakes. We knew this coming into this ALCS, and we certainly know it now. They're going to capitalize when you make mistakes. I mean, the margins here in the postseason series like this, in the American League Championship Series, you can't afford sloppy mistakes. And I wouldn't even say these were sloppy mistakes from Altuve. They weren't necessarily lazy mistakes, but you just can't afford to make those kind of errors on routine plays. You just can't. It's kind of that simple. I mean, it really is that simple. Also, timely hitting. We talked about this on Tuesday as well, and it's been a theme. It's been a big factor in why the Rays jumped out to a 3-0 series lead. Tampa Bay has shown it. They've had those timely hits. They haven't been ripping the cover off the ball in this series for the most part. They haven't been stringing together hit after hit after hit. They haven't had the Dodgers type inning, the type of inning that the Dodgers had last night, which we're going to talk about. They haven't had this big, 7-run inning. In fact, the Astros have, by some measures, hit, better than the Rays in this series. They've got more hits. I mean, but the Rays are making their hits count. They're taking advantage of when they reach on an error, of when they get walked. They're manufacturing runs, but then they're also able to go hit the home run at any point as well. And Houston has not. I wrote about this in a article that went up before yesterday's games with some observations from the League Championship Series. The Astros have been hitting very, very poorly with runners in scoring position. I believe they got their first hit of the series with runners in scoring position just in yesterday's game, if I'm remembering that stat right. They're stranding runners. They've been stranding runners. They haven't been able to hit with runners on, and you combine that with the defensive issues and the Rays jumping out to the 3-0 series lead before yesterday's Astros victory. Pitching, it seems weird to say, but pitching hasn't been, I don't know how to phrase this necessarily. I don't want to say it hasn't been a major factor, but it's generally been solid for both teams. It's not the thing that you look at this series and say, oh, well, this team's pitching fell apart, or this team's pitching just utterly dominated, and that's why the series is the way it is. That's not really it. It's the timely hitting and it's the defense. The pitching has been generally solid for both teams. The Astros, there were a lot of concerns with the Astros, and it hasn't been perfect, but their starters have, generally speaking, done pretty well. And the Rays have done pretty well. Their starters haven't been as dominant as they've been earlier in this postseason against some less formidable lineups. But against, I guess, the Blue Jays in particular, the Yankees were a very formidable lineup. But the Rays pitching hasn't been as dominant as it had been earlier in the postseason. That's very clear. They've had to work around some trouble with the Astros getting runners on. And then, of course, on the flip side of the Astros stranding runners is the Rays pitchers stranding the runners and getting the job done and not allowing those runners to score. So pitching, of course, it's mattered in this series. It's half the game, but you know it hasn't been the X factor. It's not the thing where I think of how's this series gone the way it's gone, and I say, oh, it's the pitching. The pitching's been solid on both sides. And then another key takeaway is, look, Randy Arozarena. I think I've said his name now in like 3 or 4 straight shows. He has been the most fun player to watch in this 2020 MLB postseason. He became the third rookie to hit 5 home runs in a single postseason last night. He's also tied now for the most extra base hits in Tampa Bay history with 9, tied with Evan Longoria, and I believe it was B.J. Upton, if I'm not mistaken, on that stat. Um, Also should note, the big offensive heroes for the Astros now, last night, Jose Altuve and George Springer. Uh, each of them hitting a home run last night. The pair is now tied for the most home runs in Astros postseason history with 18, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. 18 postseason home runs for both Jose Altuve and George Springer. They are both tied for 5th most such homers all time with Mickey Mantle and Reggie Jackson. So should take a minute to appreciate just how incredible some of these Astros hitters, Springer, Altuve, and also Carlos Correa, have been in the postseason in their career. How many times they've been there and how much success they've had while there. You've got, again, Altuve and Springer tied with Mickey Mantle and Reggie Jackson in postseason home runs, tied for 5th. So that's pretty darn remarkable right there. But again, major takeaways here. Look, I mean, that victory for the Astros was of course, they had to get it last night, otherwise they're done. But really, the key to this series is how the Rays jumped out to a 3-0 lead, and it's a lot of the same things we talked about on Tuesday. Defense, Rays have shown great defense. Astros have made defensive miscues mostly by Altuve, and the Rays have capitalized on it. The timely hitting. The Rays have capitalized on mistakes, and they've driven the runners in when they've been on, and the Astros have not. They've stranded runners, and they haven't had many mistakes from the Rays to capitalize on. And then, of course, Randy Arozarena is continuing to get it done, and that's how the Rays got out to this 3-0 series lead, and that's going to be, barring something crazy happening in the next few days, that's going to be the story of this series. No matter, it was going to be the story of the series if the Rays took the series, again, barring something crazy happening, that was going to be the story of the series had the Rays swept it and won last night, or if the Rays win tonight. And really, even if the Rays end up having to play, ends up being to be a game 6 and the Rays win that, I guess if it kind of drags on, then the story starts to become how the Astros were able to keep succeeding with their backs up against the wall. But that's really been the story of this series. This is a really, really fun Rays team. There's so much energy, so much excitement from this team. There's so many players that can hurt you. And watching the Rays play defense is it's a joy. It's a joy to watch this team play because they're a scrappy team. They got fundamentals. They got defense. They got defensive positioning. The Astros hitting the ball hard, but there's even when, the Rays shifting and they're in the right spots. They're able to hit the home run. They're able to play the small ball. They're able to pitch well. They're able to play the defense. It's a really fun Rays team, and it looks like a Rays team that's going to be going to the World Series for just the second time ever, which is going to be really fun to see. As far as the rest of the series, we'll talk about that as far as my predictions for tonight's game and whatnot. I think it's probably pretty clear. I'm not going to pick anything crazy to happen, but we'll talk about that coming up at the end of today's broadcast. But we're going to go ahead and take our first break of the show. When we come back, news and notes, and then we will dive into the NLCS. Some interesting, some crazy things happening in NLCS Game 3 yesterday. So we'll talk about that and a lot more coming up next here on Around the Bases from 110 Sports. All right, welcome back to Around the Bases here on a Thursday, October 15th, 2020. Let's jump right back into today's show with news and notes. Not as much to talk about today in terms of other non-postseason headlines, but here's what we do have to go through here pretty quickly. It was reported yesterday that the Los Angeles Angels have granted the White Sox permission to interview Tony La Russa for their managerial vacancy, which is a story we talked about. I mentioned it a little bit, or an aspect that I mentioned a little bit on on Tuesday's show, I should say. The 76-year-old former manager with the A's, with the White Sox, and with the Cardinals most recently. 76 years old, last managed in the big leagues the 2011 2011 season. The Cardinals won the World Series and La Russa retired, though he's been involved with multiple organizations since then in a front office capacity, serving as like a special advisor to multiple teams since his retirement from the dugout. With the Cardinals. Of course, the White Sox, as we talked about on Tuesday, they are looking to replace manager Rick Renteria, who they parted ways with, and that news was announced, of course, earlier this week. Yankees general manager Brian Cashman said yesterday that Giancarlo Stanton will be used exclusively as a DH moving forward. So that's an interesting thing. Of course, the Yankees have several other outfielders. It's not a huge development in that, they're not going to need to find an outfielder to replace him with Judge and with Hicks and with Gardner if they bring him back, and with everybody that they have in the mix with Tauchman and Frazier, and I'm sure I'm forgetting someone too. But the Yankees have plenty of options, though. It looks like Stanton, though, will be strictly a DH moving forward, which, it certainly would decrease. It's going to decrease the Yankees' roster flexibility. It doesn't mean we're going to see, Gary Sanchez in the DH spot very much, it sounds like. And Cashman also said it's certainly a fair question when asked yesterday about whether Gary Sanchez will be the Yankees' starting catcher in 2021. Of course, he had just an absolutely horrible offensive season. I don't even remember his batting average, but it was like 140 or something this year. Of course, incredible offensive potential, but, we've seen what he can do with the bat in terms of being the most powerful catcher. He has the ability to hit 40 plus home runs in a season, but it was just an absolutely brutal 2020 for Gary Sanchez. Kyle Higashioka emerged down the stretch. He was Garrett Cole's personal catcher down the stretch, so he's an option. The Yankees also could get involved in the JT Realmuto sweepstakes, as he's going to be a free agent, so it's certainly something to monitor heading into 2021. Giants first baseman Brandon Belt underwent surgery this week to remove a bone spur in his right heel. It's not clear exactly what his timetable is, but it seems like he'll be ready to go by spring training. Belt has been with the Giants a long time now. It seems like he'd be older. He's 32. It seemed to me like he might even be older than that because he's just been with that team for so long. The 32-year-old. He had a great year, actually, in 2020 in the shortened season. 309 with 9 homers this year. Also, just a little bit ago, we learned that Jose Abreu, the White Sox first baseman, was named Sporting News Major League Player of the Year. 180 MLB players voted on the award, and Abreu's name was on the most ballots. He, of course, led Major League Baseball in home runs and had an absolutely great year this in 2020 for the White Sox. Some of the other best players in baseball, Freddie Freeman, Jose Ramirez, Shane Bieber, of course, but a well-deserved honor for Jose Abreu, White Sox first baseman, who was voted by MLB's players, 180 of them, as Sporting News Major League Player of the Year. And that's it for news and notes today. Let's go ahead and jump into the NLCS. And when we talked on Tuesday's show, we had just one game to discuss, and the Braves had won that game thanks to a ninth inning offensive outburst. The Braves also won on Tuesday night. They took the first 2 games of this series, but it's now the Dodgers who have all the momentum, which seems kind of weird to think after the Braves taking the first two games in this series, and questions about Clayton Kershaw's health, or not questions, just his questions about when he may be able to return to the mound. And now it's the Dodgers who turned the table on the Braves last night in Game 3. So before we get to that, though, a little bit of a reminder, refresher, how we got here. Game 1, like we talked about, like I just mentioned, it was a ninth inning offensive outburst. Austin Riley homering, Marcell Ozuna, Ronald Acuna Jr. big hits, Ozzie Albies a home run. That all happened in a 4-run ninth inning in Game 1, which the Braves won 5-1. Game 2, it was Ian Anderson on the mound for Atlanta, and he wasn't perfect. He walked 5 batters, but it was another shutout start from Anderson. 4 innings pitched, no runs, 5 strikeouts. As he extended, the rookie extended his scoreless streak to begin this postseason. He has not allowed Ian Anderson, the rookie, who had made only something like 6 major league starts heading into this postseason, he has still not allowed a single run in the 2020 postseason. Clayton Kershaw was scratched from his scheduled Game 2 start due to back spasms, and that led the Dodgers to turn to Tony Gonsolin, who was appearing in a game for the first time in 17 days, which is a tall order for somebody to come out and be dominant after that long of a layoff. The 26-year-old started out strong. He had a good year for this team. It looks like a very good pitcher for a big part of this Dodgers roster for years to come, and he had a great 2020, but it's still not Clayton Kershaw. Even with Kershaw's postseason struggles, you want him on the mound for that game. And Gonsolin started strong, but it was the second time through the lineup that he faltered. He ended up giving up 5 earned runs he was charged with in 4 1/3 innings. Freddie Freeman homered for the Braves in the 4th inning, and then the Braves got a 4-run 5th inning. With Freeman picking up an RBI single, Travis d'Arnaud, the catcher, with a bases-loaded walk. Ozzie Albies had a sac fly, and Dansby Swanson hit a double. And so then it was the Braves taking control of Game 2 as well. Corey Seager hit a 3-run home run in the bottom of the 7th to make it a 4-run game. But then Ozzie Albies homered in the top of the 9th inning, and that brought it to a 5-run game. But the Dodgers were able to make things interesting at the end of Game 2. With 4 runs in the 9th inning, with Corey Seager picking up a double. Max Muncy hit a 2-run home run. Cody Bellinger had a triple. And the Dodgers' bats were finally coming alive late in Game 2. It looked like the Braves were going to be able to somewhat coast to a 3 or 4 run victory in Game 2, but the Dodgers bats finally got going, facing the part of the Braves bullpen that wasn't their absolute best, because look, they had a solid lead, but it ended up being that Mark Melancon had to come into the game for Atlanta. He was able to get a ground ball to end it as the Braves escaped, if you want to say escaped, is the word there, with an 8-7 victory in Game 2. And extended their winning streak to begin the postseason all the way up to 7 games, which is was tied for the second longest in MLB history. So now at that point, you have Atlanta up 2-0 in this series. You don't know when Clayton Kershaw is going to be good to go for the Dodgers, if he's going to be able to pitch again in this series at all. There was optimism, but there's questions with him. And the Dodgers are all of a sudden down 2-0 in the series. They pretty much needed a victory. I mean, they pretty much had to get a victory last night. Otherwise, you're falling down 3-0 in the series, and that of course is extremely, extremely, extremely hard to come back from. So it was pretty close, pretty much a must-win for Dave Roberts' club last night, and it was going to be Kyle Wright on the mound for the Braves, the rookie who didn't have a great regular season. His overall numbers didn't look all that great, but he threw 6 shutout innings against the Marlins in the NLCS. So there was a hope that he could maybe do that again from the Braves' perspective. But the Dodgers came out ready to go offensively as Max Muncy's grand slam capped off an 11-run first inning for the Dodgers. as they made postseason history in a 15-3 rout of the Braves in Game 3 last night to avoid falling down in the series 3-0. All 15 of the Dodgers' runs last night came in the first 3 innings of this game, in fact. The Dodgers set several offensive records in this game. It was just an incredible offensive performance in the early innings. They just jumped on, teed off against Kyle Wright in the first inning of this game. They had a 7-hit, 3-walk, 3-homer first inning, which resulted in 11 runs, which is the most scored in an inning in MLB postseason history. Also, the most scored in an inning in Dodgers history ever. Kyle Wright only was able to record 2 outs before he got pulled and was charged with 7 of those 11 runs before he was removed in favor of Grant Dayton, who came on for the Braves, and he proceeded to give up 8 runs himself. Cody Bellinger homered in the second inning. Corey Seager homered in the third. A run scored on a Will Smith ground out in the third inning. And Bellinger drove in Muncy on an RBI single in the third inning, and so the Dodgers reached 15 runs, the most ever scored by the team in a postseason game. And that's the story of the game right there. It was all in those first couple innings. By the third inning, that was it. There was no chance of any drama. It was a blowout. The Braves did add a couple runs in this game, thanks to Christian Pache's first big league home run in the third inning, and an RBI ground out from Austin Riley and RBI double from Johan Camargo in the ninth inning. But that was that. It was a big blowout, a 15-3 win for the Dodgers. Their 5 home runs from Jock Peterson, Edwin Rios, Muncy, Bellinger, and Seager, that was the most ever in a postseason game for the Dodgers in franchise history. The Dodgers also had their largest run differential, plus 12 in a postseason game for the club. They tied their franchise record for most hits in a postseason game with 16. I mean, I could keep going and going. Corey Seager finished a triple shy of the cycle. 5 players had multiple RBIs for the Dodgers. I could just keep going and going. It was an incredible offensive performance from them and a complete collapse from a pitching perspective from the Braves. A couple more game notes for you here. Julio Urias started for the Dodgers. It was his first start of the postseason. He'd been very good in relief. He walked the first 2 batters he faced, but then settled down, giving up just 3 hits and 1 earned run in 5 innings. And Kenley Jansen, we should note, the longtime Dodgers closer, who's looks like he's been very much removed from that role in the postseason. He pitched a clean 6th inning for the team. As far as the Atlanta pitching side, you know by now, I just kind of mentioned it. It was a complete disaster in Game 3. Really, it comes down to just 2 pitchers, though, as it was Kyle Wright and then Grant Dayton, who gave up basically, I think it was all those runs, or all but one of those Dodgers runs was from them. The early innings were a complete disaster, though they did get some strong innings from the bullpen in the middle innings and the late innings from the Braves, of course, holding the Dodgers scoreless after those first 3 innings. Of course, that didn't matter, I mean, for the big picture, but it was helpful that, it could have obviously been worse, I should say, and not that matters too much for yesterday's game, but it matters moving forward that they got some guys who went multiple innings. They didn't end up taxing the bullpen. They didn't end up throwing a position player on the mound. So it's not as if they had to, go through 9 relievers to get through the game and all of a sudden everybody's tired. So that's good looking forward from a Braves perspective. And there's, as far as takeaways from this series so far, the Braves still hold the series lead. As far as takeaways, they're all pretty straightforward. There's no super deep analysis here. The Braves pitching was great until it was no longer Max Fried or Ian Anderson starting. The Dodgers got the bats going against, the Braves have a great duo at the top, and then after that, there's a lot of inexperience, not as much high-level pitching, starting pitching for Atlanta. Great bullpen, and that hurt them. And the Dodgers came out firing, came out ready to go in Game 3, and just like that, the Braves' winning streak was over. It was a very impressive one while it lasted, but it finally fell apart for them in spectacular fashion last night. No one could have expected what we saw from the Dodgers just because of how historic it was, how incredible, how just, nobody could have expected them scoring as many runs as they did. But obviously, the Dodgers are a team capable of huge offensive outbursts, of stringing together big runs, hitting home runs, grand slams, hitting 5 home runs in a game. That's all things that we knew they were capable of. So there's no deep analysis here as far as how this went. The Braves offense is very good. The Dodgers offense is very good. They didn't show up very much the first few games, and then they did in Game 3 when it wasn't one of the Braves co-aces pitching. And now it's 2-1 Atlanta lead, but the Dodgers have the momentum in this series. My prediction is, and I guess I'll try to make it a little bit more of a bold prediction, or not bold, but to give you something a little bit more concrete. I will say that whoever wins Game 4 tonight wins this series, because if the Braves win Game 4 tonight, it's a 3-1 series lead, and I think at that point, 3 chances to win 1 game. I think the Braves win tonight. They get back that, momentum, if you really want to put a lot of stock in that. But if they win tonight, it's 3-1. I think they're winning this series. But if the Dodgers win tonight, I think they're winning this series. Now, of course, if the Dodgers win tonight, it's just 2-2. So it's certainly very possible. That's maybe the bolder part of that prediction, if you will. Because the Dodgers could win tonight, and then the Braves throw Max Fried out there on short rest, and he shuts them down, and the Braves get back on track and win the next 2 games. But I really think if the Dodgers are able to win tonight, then they're coming back to win this series from being down 2 games to nothing. Big key here, Clayton Kershaw is pitching tonight for the Dodgers. Dave Roberts announced that after the game last night. Kershaw on the mound for the Dodgers. It sounds like he's doing well. Of course, there's always risk that his back issues could pop back up again in the middle of the start, and he could get pulled or he could get scratched from the start. A lot of things could happen, but it sounds like he's doing well, and he could go out there. I mean, I could just see a situation where he goes, even if he doesn't, go 7 or 8 innings, if he just goes 6 solid innings, and then the Dodgers beat up on rookie Bryce Wilson, who is on the mound tonight for Atlanta. I could see this being another, not a blowout to the level of what we saw last night, but another, pounce on the young pitcher early if you're the Dodgers, and get strong enough outing from their starter. In this case, it's going to be Kershaw, and all of a sudden they've got 2 big wins in a row. It's tied, but the Dodgers have all this momentum, and they can maybe send Walker Buehler back out to the mound. All of a sudden, I think that, so again, that's my prediction. I think whoever wins this Game 4 tonight is going to win the NLCS. Well, obviously we'll have to wait and see if that proves true or not. But that's where we are right now. The Braves, again, they're going to have to throw out a starter not named Max Fried, Ian Anderson, or Kyle Wright for the first time this postseason. Because they were on this winning streak, they never had to go, they in the wild card series, they went Fried, Anderson, and then it was over. They won the first 2 games against the Reds, and that was it. They advance. They face the Marlins. They send Fried, and then they send Anderson, and then they send out, for Game 3, they send out Kyle Wright, and he does well, and then that's it. They're moving on. A sweep of the Marlins. And then they send out Fried, and they send out Anderson in the League Championship Series, and they do great, and then they send out Wright, and it doesn't work out, and now they're going to have to turn to Bryce Wilson, who just made 2 starts this season, threw 15 2/3 innings this season. So it's not a great situation for them. They do have a strong bullpen, and many of their high leverage guys were not called into action last night because of how much of a blowout it was. But it's a situation where it could easily keep snowballing. I could see the Dodgers just continuing to chug on along here with this momentum that they've gotten from Game 3. We're going to go ahead and take our final break of the broadcast. When we come back, what's on deck? We'll take a quick look at the the scoreboard, the schedule for today. We've just learned in the last little bit here who the starters are going to be for the Astros and the Rays this evening. So we'll talk about that next coming up here on Around the Bases from 110 Sports. All right, welcome back in one final time on this Thursday, October 15th, to Around the Bases here on the 110 Sports Network. Just time for What's on Deck. It gets this segment getting simpler and simpler the longer we go into this postseason because we just have a couple of games to talk about. We have ALCS Game 5 and NLCS Game 4 on the schedule for today. The first game of the evening is at just after 5 p.m. Eastern. It'll be Rays and Astros. The Astros, of course, needing another victory to avoid elimination by the Tampa Bay Rays, who just need now one win in the next 3 games, hoping it doesn't go that far from their perspective, to advance to the World Series for the second time in franchise history. We just learned a little bit ago here within this broadcast who's going to be on the mound for the Astros and Rays in this Game 5 because we're in a situation where it's Game 5 yet without the off days that we would normally have. The game that one starters or Game 2 starters for these teams aren't really ready to come back and pitch yet. In a normal, this is something we've talked about, in a normal league championship series, there are these off days such that you don't need a 5-man or maybe even you don't even need a 4-man rotation. But now you're in a situation where the Rays and Astros are going to throw out guys who aren't, neither of them are there, going to be sending out their very best starters to the mound. For the Astros, in fact, it's going to be Luis Garcia on the mound. Tonight, Dusty Baker announcing that just a little bit ago. The 23-year-old will be making his first postseason appearance. He has not even pitched at all for the Astros this postseason. He started just one game this season for the Astros and pitched in relief 4 times during the regular season. He gave up 4 runs in 12 and a third innings in the regular season. So wouldn't expect a very long start for Luis Garcia tonight. He is on the mound for Houston. Meanwhile, I also wouldn't expect to see a long start at all for the Rays, who are sending out John Curtis to the mound as their opener. He's like I said, he's their opener. He's not going to be going very long in this game. Unclear where the Rays are going to turn after that, but Curtis to the mound, the reliever. He's been someone who they have used in an opener role before. He's not one of their top relievers, but he has some ability, of course. So I would not expect to see either of these starters, Luis Garcia or John Curtis, probably go more than Curtis probably an inning or two. Garcia, even a best case scenario, is probably only like 4 innings. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out from the bullpen perspective. We could see a really high scoring game tonight for the Rays and Astros. We could also see, we could also see the opposite. We could also see the Rays piece together something like they've done with throw 7 or 8 pitchers out there to get a victory and advance with several guys going out and throwing scoreless innings, or we could see a really high scoring affair as well. It's going to be interesting to watch Dusty Baker's management of the Astros bullpen tonight because, of course, they're in a must-win situation, obviously. Meanwhile, on the NL side, it's NLCS Game 4. As I mentioned, we talked about this already. It's going to be Clayton Kershaw back out on the mound for the Dodgers. His first start of this series after he was scratched from Game 2 due to back spasms. Meanwhile, Bryce Wilson, the rookie, on the mound for Atlanta. It's the third straight rookie that the Braves are starting in this series. They're hoping they can, I don't think anybody can expect him to go 7 innings in 1 run, but if he could just give them, 4 innings of a run or 2 allowed, or maybe a little better than that, even then, they could have a good chance. This is Braves offense that we know what they're capable of, and Kershaw, that's going to be kind of the thing that I'm watching tonight. Is he able to go deep? Is he bothered at all by his back situation? And then, of course, there's the Kershaw pitching in the postseason narrative. How's he going to do in this start? He's been great this year, so we'll see how that plays out. I guess as far as my predictions for tonight, I'm going to say, let's start with this Dodgers-Braves series. This is interesting because I said just a few minutes ago, I said whoever wins Game 4 in the NLCS is going to win this series. So that means whoever I'm picking to win tonight is who I'm picking at this point to win the series. And I'm going to say the Dodgers win Game 4, and then by definition of what I said before, that the Dodgers still win this series. They were my pick heading into this series. Really like what we saw from the Braves early, of course, in this series, and I really like this Braves team, and I won't have any problem. I won't be upset at all if the Braves are able to advance to the World Series, but I'm going to pick the winners. I'm going to pick the Dodgers to win Game 4 tonight with Kershaw on the mound, and then based on what I said before, I picked the Dodgers to win this series, despite the fact that they were down 2-0. Meanwhile, the ALCS, I am going to pick... I'm going to say the Rays finish it off tonight. I don't know exactly why I feel that way. Other than that, it's really going to be a tricky situation for Dusty Baker to manage this bullpen tonight. Of course, he can do it, and it's not really specific to Dusty Baker. But you're sending out a guy for his first postseason appearance who has very, very little experience at the big league level. In Luis Garcia, it's not the most locked down bullpen. This Astros bullpen is easily the, it's a lot of it's just due to injuries of veterans during the regular season, but it's easily the worst bullpen of the 4 bullpens that are left in this postseason. So, and I just see the Rays being able to piece this together. They're just I'm very confident, of course, in the Rays winning this series, but I'm going to say that they get it done tonight. I'm going to say that the Astros aren't able to force a Game 6. I say the Rays win Game 5, and they advance to the World Series for just the second time in franchise history. Meanwhile, I'm saying the Dodgers win Game 4 of the NLCS, and I think this is one that's probably going to go, I say they win, they tie this up at 2, And then this is probably one that goes 7 games because, of course, for this to go any less than 7 games and the Dodgers to win it would mean them winning 3 in a row, or actually 4 in a row. 3 in a row from this point on. So I'm going to say this one goes to 7 games. And like I said, the Dodgers winning the NLCS. That's my prediction still. But that's going to do it for today's edition of Around the Bases here from 110 Sports. As always, appreciate you watching. We'll be back with the latest on Tuesday at a normal time of 1 p.m. Eastern. By then, we will be previewing the World Series, which begins on Tuesday. We don't have the time and details for that. I don't think yet, but we'll talk on Tuesday about World Series previews. So we don't have any of those teams yet. I don't know who they're going to be. So stay tuned this weekend to see, of course, how this plays out. I think we'll have the Rays in there. Pretty confident about that, but it's very much going to be interesting to see how it plays out on the NL side. So on Tuesday's show, it'll be a pretty simple formula as well. We'll be breaking down what you need to know heading into the World Series, giving you the big storylines, giving you what you need to know, what could be the key, my predictions and whatnot. But in the meantime, stay tuned to the 110 Sports Live Network. We've got more coverage for you. In the meantime, Josh Molinix is back with his show tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, and then again on Monday. And then Josh Doring is back with Touchline Talk on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern as well. Go to 110sportsmedia.com right now. We've got a lot of great content up on the site right now for you to check out. We've all three of us, me, Josh, and Josh, have been putting out a good deal of content this week. So we've got a lot of stuff that's kind of, I don't want to say it's not evergreen, but it's content that is gonna have some timeliness here for a couple of days or more at least. So it's something to check out. We've got 10 takeaways from the college football season, NBA bubble factor fiction. We've got a breakdown of Josh Molinix going through, starting an analysis of for the 2020 NBA draft. He's looking at point guards this week. So there's a lot to check out on the website right now. So make sure you check that out. Subscribe to 110 Sports newsletter. It's on the right side of the homepage. You put in your email. You'll get the latest content delivered to your inbox every Friday morning from us at 110 Sports. But thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the baseball this weekend. Stay safe, and I will talk to you again on Tuesday.